Another Sales Wisdom Pod with Collin Mitchell, VP of Sales at Leadium. We're going to talk about sales. We're going to talk about one of the company that I admired, Lydian. They're kind of the Charizard evolution of my Charmander top leads agency, which is an SDR agency, more boutique, as I was talking with Collin, different approach than Science, which is another big player out there. Collin, welcome to the pod. Can you tell us a bit more about yourself?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Charles. Excited to have the conversation. Love going on podcasts. Love talking about all things sales, and very excited.
How did you scale Leadium to where it did? Well, I mean, you've been there for 3 months, but how did Leadium scale to today? And what is your plan to bring it to the next level? And if you could define that next level, that'd be nice.
Yeah. So, funny enough, I actually, so I've had 4 startups myself. I sold 3, and 2 of those exits, Leadium played a huge part in. So, I actually used to be a Leadium customer. So I've known the founders, Kevin and Sergey, for quite some time, and have just always kind of known how they've done business and things like that, and how they do things differently than some other players in this space. Because as you know, it's a very crowded space. Appointment setting, lead generation, agency, and unfortunately, there's also a lot of bad actors. Right? There's very few that actually do good work, and frankly, actually care about delivering results for their clients. And so I had personally gone through the experience of using some agencies that did not work out so well, and that's when I found Leadium, and had really good success with using them myself, in helping me scale to exits. And so then it was a pretty naturally good fit to join the team actually a little bit more recently, where we have a huge focus on growing Leadium. And I've actually only been with them for a couple months now, but it's been a pretty awesome ride, and I was able to fit in pretty quickly just knowing them for so long and how they operate.
Well, where do you want to bring the company? Because I guess if I would have to take a wild guess, Lydium is probably at 10 million ARR or something like that. Where do you want to take them?
Yeah, I mean, the goal is really to try to double revenue, and so that's kind of why I've came on, is to help with scaling it to the next level, which is sort of my area of expertise. I love scaling. I love early stage scrappy business models, and also doing it in a way where it's fully bootstrapped and profitable.
Nice. How do you want to get to that level? Multi-touch campaigns, AI. What are your favorite outbound strategies out there?
Yeah. So funny enough, Leadium actually does 0 outbound for ourselves. Most of our leads, all of our leads, come in through inbound. And one of the things that has, that I think a lot of people could probably learn from is being selective, being disciplined enough to say no to some people, right? Because as you know, outbound doesn't work for everybody, right? Like, we view outbound as an acquisition channel. Some, businesses are just, not far along enough yet. They don't even know if they solve a real problem. Or on the other side of the spectrum, they're just in a very saturated market where, their ICP is getting just hammered with a value prop that, is no different than any others. Right. And so, when it's actually, the more obscure industries that, can do really well on outbound, or, companies that have a really unique, mature value proposition, those campaigns typically work really well. So the point that I'm getting at is a lot of times people think, more business equals more growth, and not necessarily. And that's something that, we've known for a while, is the right business is what leads to growth. And so actually saying no more often can lead to the growth that you're thinking. And maybe that means you can charge more. Maybe that means you're a little bit more exclusive. Maybe that means, you only take on a certain amount of clients per month, and that's it, no more, no less. And so you can put these sort of guardrails in place, that do make it a little bit more exclusive, but also allow you to serve the people that you do best with.
Love it. Tell us about the 4 exits you've had I want to talk like specifically about Salescast as well. That particularly caught my attention. But do you build your businesses to exits normally, and how did these exits feel? Like was it game changing?
Yeah. So they're moderate exits, profitable, successful exits, but not like life changing, like, hey, I don't have to work anymore type of exit. But I actually started my first business with my wife, and that business I still own today. I'm just not very involved in. We sold office equipment and supplies and technology products and services, mainly to school districts. Grew that business from 0 to 5 million in annual revenue in like 26 months. Was really lucky and fortunate to hire some great people and build a great, sales team, all fueled by outbound sales, by the way. $0 spent on marketing, nothing fancy. And then from there, I started a voice over IP business. So we did unified communications. We had a platform that we operated and built some custom things on top of it as well. Scaled that from 0 to 6,000 customers in a little under 2 years and sold that business. And then I had a small marketing and development agency, which I exited. Very modest, small company, just not a business that I really enjoyed doing, to be honest. And then most recent was Salescast. So we were a B2B content agency producing and managing podcasts for a lot of B2B sales influencers, and scaled that business to 0 to over $1 million in annual revenue in under 2 years as well, and then exited that.
Very impressive. How's it like to work with Brandon? I followed his content quite a lot. He's the CEO of Seamless. What did you learn from working with him?
Yeah, I've actually known Brandon for quite a while. A lot of people just know Brandon, online, actually he's more of a down to earth guy than I think a lot of people realize. He just, really enjoys, growing and, companies. And, he is, he's a great guy. People can actually learn a lot from him. He was a great client of ours early on, and was able to work with him and his team and help them actually grow their channels and their podcast pretty significantly.
Love it. And yeah, Salescast is quite fascinating. I recently started my own podcast agency not so long ago. What would you give me as insights or pieces of advice that I could use to be successful on my side?
Yeah, I think finding, as cliche as it sounds, but like finding a niche is important. When you try to be every, thing to everybody, you lose focus of what maybe, where you can have a lot of success, right? So we found like this B2B, sales influencer sort of niche that we worked really well in. And then we just sort of rode that wave, which, we experienced pretty massive growth from just kind of staying focused. There was some people, outside of that came in through referrals and such, but for the most part, we were very focused on one specific niche that we knew, how to produce results for very well.
Pricing 2.5K a month, it seems somewhat affordable. Did you had upsells in there, or that was the core pack?
No, we had custom packages for a lot of folks. That was sort of like the baseline to get started, and then there was many people who needed more than sort of the basic package. But I think when you price things like that, having some transparency, having a simple, easy way for people to get started and understand the value of what they're getting is also important.
Right. And for that, one weekly podcast, so 4 guests a month, is that right?
Yeah.
Interesting. The guests, how would you get them? How would you filter them? How would you make sure that every time they step on the mic, that they add great value for the audience?
Some don't.
Truth.
Yeah. I mean, the guests, picking good guests for your podcast can be tricky. Some people like to do a prep call before because they want to see like, hey, make sure this person's not a bit of a dud, which happens. I actually, I've had experiences where I've had people on my show where I thought they're going to be great and I really just didn't enjoy the conversation. And you don't have to release those episodes. Like that happens. I've also had, situations where I've had people on a show and they just go on a big long tangent and like there's just not a lot of value, and I've stopped the podcast and said, hey, I'm really sorry, but this is not what we're shooting for here. So I think being a podcast host is a bit of a responsibility of like trying to source the right people, maybe also setting like proper expectations of like, hey, here's kind of what we're going for. Now if you have somebody who has been on a lot of podcasts, maybe you've heard their content, you kind of know, then you saves the hassle there of some of those things. But if it's somebody you're really not sure, but one of the most effective things for podcast hosts is just using it as a tool to build relationships, to build their network with people that they want to either build partnerships with, they want to share and collaborate content with, that they want to maybe do business with. Like there's a lot of value in using your podcast as a vehicle to open doors that can be a little bit more challenging to open otherwise. And it's an easier way to stand out and get people to say yes, rather than, hey, do you want to hop on a sales call?
Right. Okay. So first, like stopping the pod, I've never actually done that. Maybe I lack the balls, or I'm just like too nice. But and also there's, when it comes to relationship building, I might give them feedback when the pod's done. Might try to intervene live on the pod and tell them and switch question and interrupt. I don't have a problem doing that. But folks that I feel are not there yet, after the pod, I'm like, dude, you need to work on this, and that. I can help you start your pod. And I think we'd be a perfect fit for coaching, So that's my downsell. Now for folks that have been on other pods, there's still a challenge with these guys. Most of them just recycle content. So Tony Robbins, one of my favorite humans on earth. Yeah. I don't think I'd love to have him on a pod because he just goes on a fucking tangent and you can't stop it. And he just like says the same thing over and over again. So you kind of need to interrupt patterns. So I'll let you speak on these 2 points because I have some more. What do you think?
Yeah. I mean, you're right about that. Some of the big names that everybody's like, oh, I'd love to have this person on my podcast. They typically have an agenda. They're always selling something, right? Whatever that is, themselves, their next book, their next workshop, their next event, their whatever. Like they are literally most likely coming on your podcast for their own selfish agenda. That's the reality. And not all, I'm not going to say all, I don't want to say all people, but I would say a majority of people that, are at, say like in or, around that level. And they have some very specific talk tracks that they stick to. Right. So, doing your research ahead and maybe, not necessarily trying to stump them, but, having some, knowing some good information about them before of, where you would like to, what questions you'd like to ask or what direction you'd like to take the conversation definitely makes for a better experience too, that it shows that you actually, did a little bit of research on them. So that's important. The other thing is, sometimes the people on the flip side, the people that you least expect can be the best, guests, right? People that like aren't very active on social, don't do a lot of content, but they just have the most fascinating and interesting stories. And they're like the most open and willing to like talk about things that have a ton of value.
100%, man. I've had these folks plenty of times, which is why I go both ways. I always experiment, so I reach out to folks that have experience on podcasts. Those do not require pre-interview as well. They're like, let's go straight up in. My favorite types of folks are what I call open books, so straight up, they tell me I'm an open book, so I know I can go anywhere. And these are quite fun. Now with the folks that prepare a script and have this PR agency, me, I'm like, dude, don't you understand that first, if you recycle the same message and you're on this other podcast, the person will not get any value from you. And they'll start thinking, oh, this guy just recycled the same script over and over again. He's not authentic. And that's the first thing I have to tell these folks out there if they're listening. And the second one is that if you add value to someone and if you're authentic, they will trust you and they will naturally search you and buy your product. What do you think about that?
I think that it's not the only thing that matters, but it's definitely, I would say for most people, it's one that's very important, then and so PR. So you got to ask yourself, like, what are you doing to build that trust, right? And that rapport?
Yeah. And the thing is that these folks, most of the time, they already have that trust. Anyway, it leads to my next topic, which is PR. Do you think PR agencies have actual values to these folks, or they're mostly just like sticks in wheels? And then if they are kind of gatekeepers, quote unquote, how do you get around them or persuade them to give you access to the resource?
You mean to these like high profile guests?
Yeah.
I don't know. I haven't had a ton of experience with that. I so honestly I don't know.
Because me, my hit rate with like PR agency is like 10%, they don't see any value in my pod, which I understand, like I'm still like quite early in my journey, get like 100 to 1K views per video. I have like 15K views on my LinkedIn and so forth, but it compounds, and the more I attract people, these pods, I consider them to be evergreen. The more resource I put in my pods, and pods are probably 60% of my energy spent right now, the more they will
Yeah.
get some views. Plus, I fancy myself as a good and unconventional question asker, but they don't probably give a shit about that. So, yeah, that's a question I had.
Yeah, I think a lot of times with the PR agencies, the tricky part is like they have their network of people and they have their, media outlets that they, would prefer for the talent that they represent to go on. So they are a little bit more cautious of, more up and coming, sort of media opportunities.
Right. Then I use outbound. I've described a couple of channels here. So, like when it comes to getting superstars, I just scrape the guests out of the best podcasts. So I don't have much filtering work to do there. I already know they're going to be good guests. I also know that the yes rate will be a bit lower. And I have what I call, well, mostly cold campaigns in which I outreach to a bunch of CEOs. I send them the message, then I send them an automated message once they tell me yes. I get a very high reply rate on that one too. And I offer them either a pre-interview call or a full call, and then that gives me the time to actually screen them. So one, what do you think about that channel? And two, yes, it's almost unpredictable, the quality that I can get. What would you recommend that I do? Should I just keep on going that way and experiment and see what works? And rely on serendipity, because it's just like signing up new clients, right? I never really know who's the wild card in the clients that I sign. Sometimes they're super nice, and as soon as I receive the payment, they become assholes, So how do you make that predictable?
I mean, it's it's something that's tricky. Like you're never going to get perfect at it. I think over time, it's something you get better at, of being a little bit more, a little bit pickier on who you take on board and such, because, we've all had those experiences where it's like, hey, you kind of get a feeling where you're like, yeah, I'm not too sure if it's a good fit, but and you make that exception, and sometimes you like, maybe there is no red flags, and then you find out, after the fact. But you start to see certain things where like, hey, people that ask these, kind of stupid questions typically become a real pain in my, what, or, I think over time you start to get better at filtering out people that, could potentially be, more of a hassle than they're worth.
Yeah, Nita, stage one is like just looking at their LinkedIn signature. If it's like a pixelized logo dating from the 80s, and or if the email says, uh, please don't print this email for the environment, I potentially know that they're outdated and that they won't have any value. The step two is like, probably if they pass that test, is going on their LinkedIn and seeing who they are. Again, do they have an 80s picture as their LinkedIn profile picture,
Yeah.
or do they make errors in their LinkedIn? What kind of people they are. And then a lot of people talk about AI nowadays, but our own brains is like this super AGI, so I can just look at the LinkedIn page and know in like one flash of a second if they're good or not. Talking about that, are you using any AI nowadays for sales or to optimize sales ops?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're not using AI today, then what the heck is wrong with you? There's AI for, there's AI for everything. The problem is filtering out the tools that are kind of gimmicky and don't really, produce the type of quality for whatever it is that you're using it for. Right. So I think, even just if we talk about ChatGPT, like most people aren't willing to put in the work or the time that's needed to really master it, to like learn how to give it enough context and how to, really get it to a place where, it's pretty much usable, where you don't have to like make a lot of tweaks or edits. Most people, get frustrated and give up. Right. And then there's, all kinds of other AI tools that people are using, in their business, I've even seen AI tools for podcasting where it's like you could upload an episode and it gives you like tons of content and notes and all kinds of stuff. Some of those tools are great. Some, the finished product of what comes out is not so great, and so requires a lot of edits and such. So it's just finding the ones that actually, perform well and actually save you time. And I think that's the thing that, people need to look out for, is like not all AI tools are equal.
What's next for Colin Mitchell? Like, what's your day-to-day like, and what do you want to accomplish for the rest of this year?
Yeah, my focus is really just on growing Leadium at the moment, growing the revenue, growing the team, and staying pretty focused on that at the moment.
Last question. I actually want to show you something quite interesting here for people. It's about referrals. So see Brandon here. When this pod started, I actually reached out to him. I made an error in your name, by the way. But I said, just had Collin Mitchell on my pod, and there you go. Response 6 minutes after. So what do you think about referrals and their power to get more clients or more podcast guests?
I think referrals are extremely powerful, but it also, not all referrals are equal, right? So I know Brandon, fairly well, right? So name dropping me with him is different than maybe name dropping, with somebody else who doesn't know him fairly well, right? And so referrals are kind of a tricky thing, because everybody says like, hey, referrals are powerful, referrals work. But they're as effective as the person that's referring. And so, if you're somebody who, if you're the type of person that's heavily connected and has, left, good impressions and experiences with people, then referrals from you are very powerful. If you're not, right, then it's the opposite, right? So, I think that, every founder, revenue leader needs to understand that like your reputation matters. And so whether you do business with somebody, whether you don't do business with somebody, whether you were doing business and then you stopped doing business, or, whether you're on a podcast, or, what experience are you leaving people with? What value are you adding, right? Are you somebody who's just there to take and see what you can get? Or are you really, truly providing value and leaving people with good experiences? And if that's the case, then, referrals, reciprocal, can be very effective as far as, you referring people or them referring people to you.
I just want to add one important point, which is not often discussed there with reputation. Make sure to select who you have as your client. Make sure you're not dealing with idiots. If you deal with people that are part of, like a weird or shady or lack of integrity community, I don't know, like crypto or whatever. Me back in days, I was dealing with realtors, and these folks, they probably don't give a shit about you, and they can spread negative reputation. So me, I made the shift about 6 years ago to really deal with my ideal clients and who I wanted to be, CEOs, founders of tech companies, and so forth. And that also really much helps with the reputation. It's a contrarian point, but yeah, just thought I'd put it out there. Yeah, last question, Colin. What did you think about that episode in that podcast?
On which one?
This one.
Oh yeah. I think you asked some great questions. Overall, I enjoyed coming on the show. So whoever's listening, it takes a lot of work to put on a good quality podcast like this. So, do Charles a favor, subscribe to the show, write an honest review, share the show with your friends. All those things are the best way you can show your gratitude, for Charles, putting in the work, finding guests, recording content, and putting it out regularly.